Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa afdal as-salati wa azka at-taslimi ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahabatihi wa man tamassaka bihadihi wa sunnatihi ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Inshallah ta'ala, we will continue with our next session of Monday Night Boost, and we're up to Hadith number 9, alhamdulillah. Almost a quarter of the book has been done. Alhamdulillah, we're going to keep continuing until we finish, inshallah, with all of the ahadith, with the permission and the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I just want to make one announcement before we continue. Make sure that we welcome all ages, alhamdulillah. It doesn't matter what your age is, you can come, join, benefit, inshallah ta'ala. But what I'm going to ask is that if you have children, just try to make sure that you keep them with you. Just so that everybody can, focus on what's being said. So if someone needs to ask a question, they're not distracted, inshallah. Inshallah ta'ala, let's just abide by that rule, inshallah, so that everything can run smoothly, inshallah. So, moving on forward, we have hadith number 9, the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, he was a sahabi. We have heard, many of us have definitely heard about Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. You definitely at least heard about his name. You definitely, you've absolutely heard a hadith that was narrated by him before. And now today, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to talk about, one hadith that was narrated by Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. So if you find, if you've caught the trend of our classes so far in the hadith, if you read the 40 hadith and you read any book of hadith, what you're going to find is that in any book of hadith, if it doesn't mention the whole chain of narration, at least it's going to mention the sahabi who narrated the hadith. And that's to show you that every single authentic hadith, every single hadith that's sahih, we know who narrated it and who narrated from those who narrated from the Prophet ﷺ, all the way down to whichever imam recorded it in his book. So this particular hadith is in the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari and Muslim, and both of their hadith collections. And in both of their collections, they mention those who they heard it from, and they mention those people heard it from, all the way until it came back to Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Perhaps Imam al-Bukhari, he heard it from different teachers. Perhaps Imam Muslim heard it from different teachers, but it all went back to who? Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. And sometimes you find that there's many ahadith that can go back to different sahabiyat, different sahaba. For example, you may have a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ addressed the Sahaba, and you have 2 or 3 or 4 companions narrating the same incident, right? So any authentic hadith, it must go back to a Sahabi, it must go back to a companion of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. So this particular hadith goes back to Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. Now Imam al-Nawawi, when he mentions this hadith, he says An Abi Abdul Rahman, narrated by the father of Abdul Rahman, Abu Abdul Rahman, Abdul Rahman ibn Sakhr radiyallahu anhu. He mentions the full name of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. Now the name Abu Hurairah, alright, Abu Hurairah was a nickname given to this particular sahabi, but it wasn't his actual name. His name was Abdul Rahman. Now some scholars, they mentioned that his name, they had different opinions as to what his name was actually, but it just shows you that when sometimes they become so popular with their nickname, you forget what their actual name is, right? And I'm pretty sure some of you can relate to this. Sometimes your family, they have a name for you, and then all of a sudden they mention that name in the public, and now everybody calls you that, and they don't really know your actual name, right? So, Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, the scholars don't even have a definite answer. They have difference of opinion as to what his name actually was, okay? So Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, he's born 18 years before the Hijrah, all right? He was born 18 years before the Hijrah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Okay, and he accepted Islam in the 7th year of the Hijrah. Okay, so in other words, we've previously spoken about the migration of the Prophet ﷺ to Medina. 7 years after the Prophet ﷺ migrates to Medina, he accepts Islam. That's what, that's when he accepts Islam. So how many years would he have spent with the Prophet ﷺ? How many years? 16 or 17 years? He accepted Islam at the 7th year of the Hijrah, meaning 7 years after the migration to Medina. How many years after the Hijrah did the Prophet ﷺ pass away? Good, the answer is 3. He stayed with the Prophet ﷺ around 3 years, because the Prophet ﷺ died between 10 to 11 years after the Hijrah, right? And if he accepted Islam only the 7th year of the Hijrah, then he only spent about 3 years with the Prophet ﷺ. And that's an amazing fact because Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, amongst all of the Sahaba, he was known, along with the other diligent of the Sahaba, but Abu Hurairah was known for studying hadith and narrating hadith, right? And that's why you're going to find that the scholars mentioned that he's narrated 5,374 hadiths. Over 5,000 hadiths you're going to find, they have been narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, right? He's the #1 hadith narrator. In other words, when you look at the books of hadith, the name that you're going to find the most, the name of the Sahabi that you're going to find the most is Abu Hurairah. Right? Sometimes you find that this hadith has been narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha. Sometimes it's narrated by Umar radiallahu anhu. Sometimes it's narrated by Ibn Umar, the son of Umar. Remember, we've seen these hadith, right? Sometimes you're going to mention, you're going to see that it's been narrated by Nu'man ibn Bashir radiallahu anhu. Many different, Sahaba. Okay, but the name that you're going to find the most is Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. And that shows you that even though he spent 3 years with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right, a person can learn a lot in 3 years. Right, a person can learn a lot from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and from the other Sahaba in 3 years. And Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he was known for his piety, he was known for his night prayer, he was known for teaching the people, and like I said, he was known for narrating a hadith. Umar radiallahu anhu, after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, this was Abu Hurairah's job, right? He would sit and he would narrate hadiths to his students. People would come to him from all over the place to learn about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam after he died, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Abu Hurairah would narrate these hadiths, and he became very popular and very well known. Right? People would seek him out and ask him, for his opinion, ask him his view, ask him about the life of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he would give them the answers. After the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, Abu Bakr becomes a Khalifa. Abu Hurairah he continues teaching and practicing the Sunnah. Abu Bakr passes away. Umar becomes the Khalifa. Now, when Umar becomes a Khalifa, he appoints Abu Hurairah as the governor of Bahrain. And Abu Hurairah, he continued in that post, and he continued, teaching and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until he died at the 59th year of the Hijrah. Right? The 59th year of the Hijrah. So in total, he lived about 77 years. 77 years. He accepted Islam at the 7th year of the Hijrah, right? Which he was around the age of 25 at that time. And he continued practicing Islam, and he died upon Islam at the age of 77. So it's very important that we understand who exactly were these Sahaba that we talk about. Right? Because a lot of people, they throw accusations against Abu Hurairah. They say that if he was only with the Prophet ﷺ for 3 years, how is he narrating all of these hadiths? And just because a Sahabi narrates a hadith doesn't mean that he heard it directly from the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes a Sahabi can narrate a hadith from another Sahabi. Right? So Abu Hurairah, obviously he was not around during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, during the early days of prophethood and the early days of, messengership. But whatever he could find from the other Sahaba, he would learn, and he would learn from the Prophet ﷺ in the little time that he had. So this is who we're talking about. Now, we have this hadith here. Can I have somebody read this hadith, inshallah? Nadia, can you read this hadith for me, please? Yeah, thank you.
On the authority of Abu Hurairah, I heard the Messenger of Allah said, "Avoid that which I forbid to do, and do that which I command you to do to the best of your capacity. Verily, the people before you were destroyed only because of their excessive questioning and their disagreement with their prophets."
Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you very much. So this hadith right here is a very great hadith, and we're going to talk about it inshallah ta'ala. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, "مَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ." Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he narrates this hadith to us, and he tells us that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "What I have forbidden you from, stay away from it." Right? فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ, stay away from it. وَمَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِهِ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. And whatever I commanded you with, then try to do it as much as you can. Okay? So let's talk about that first part, inshallah ta'ala. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned two things: what I commanded you with, and what I forbid you from. So let's just look at the way that he worded what he said. He said, whatever I have forbidden you from, then stay away from it. And whatever I have commanded you to do, then do it as much as you can. As much as you can. Obviously, you can see that there's a difference here. The Prophet ﷺ didn't say, whatever I've commanded you to do, then do it. He didn't say that. He said, do it as much as you can. So now my question is the Prophet ﷺ, he tied doing the commandments with ability, but he did not tie leaving the prohibitions with ability. Right? He said that the things that he's forbidden us from, then stay away from it. He didn't say if you're able to stay away from it, stay away from it. But the things that He wants you to do, He said, do them as much as you can. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Why didn't He say, what I have forbidden you from, stay away from it, and whatever I have commanded you to do, then do it? Why did He link doing the commandments with ability? Good, excellent. It's because when it comes to leaving something off, that doesn't require any effort, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, whatever I have forbidden you from. In other words, if I said don't do something, if I said this is haram or Allah has made this haram, then stay away from it, right? Because that's less energy, that's less effort that you're going to be, exerting, right? You don't have to do anything. I'm telling you not to do something, right? And then the Prophet ﷺ, he says, but whatever I have commanded you to do, to pray salah, to pray, to pay the zakat, to fast during Ramadan, or whatever He has commanded you to do it as much as you can. Because when it comes to doing something, there's effort involved, and everybody may not have the same capacity of effort. Excellent, as the sister has mentioned. So, now the thing is that some people, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that whatever I have commanded you to do, then do it as much as you can. Some people, they would look at this hadith, and they would look at verses that tell us to fear Allah as much as you can. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says in Surah Al-Taghabun, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Then fear Allah as much as you can. Somebody may say, well, some people use this verse as kind of like a ticket to kind of get away and do whatever they want to do. Right? You try to advise the person and tell him, hey man, you can't be doing this, you need to pray your salah. He's like, I'm trying as best as I can. The Prophet ﷺ said you should do it as best as you can. Right? That's what I'm doing. But obviously, what does it mean when the Prophet ﷺ tells us that do it, as much as you can? What is he talking about there? Is he talking about if you're lazy and you don't feel like doing it, or is it actual, ability? Obviously, it's the second thing, right? It's the actual ability that you have. Now, obviously, if you want to use it as an excuse that, oh man, I can't get up for Fajr because I don't have the ability, I'm trying to fear Allah as much as I can. I'm trying to do what I'm being commanded to as much as I can. Obviously, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would know what's inside of your heart. Right? And Allah Azza wa Jalla will hold us accountable. So you can't really play around here, right? Because we have to realize that the one that we're playing around with is Allah, who knows us better than we know ourselves. Right? So you can't really fool anybody. You're only fooling yourself. Okay? Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and this is from the traits of the hypocrites, the munafiqun. Allah, He says, إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهَ وَهُوَ خَادِعُهُم. That the munafiqeen, they try to deceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is deceiving them. Obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't deceive people, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deceives people as a punishment for what they try to do against Allah Azza wa Jal. So then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you look at it, he says, he says, what I have forbidden you from doing, right? مَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ. Whatever I have prohibited you from, then stay away from it. He didn't say don't do it. What's the difference between don't do it and stay away from it? Obviously, you can see that if somebody tells you to stay away from it, you shouldn't even come close to it. Right? You shouldn't even come close to it. So the Prophet ﷺ, he's not saying don't do it, but he's saying stay away from it. In other words, there's so many things that are haram today. So many things in our society that are haram. Getting girlfriends, drinking alcohol, listening to music, or whatever the case is, whatever you're being tested with. Right? If you want to stay away from something that's haram, take the advice of the Prophet ﷺ, stay as far away from it as possible. Right? If you're trying to give up a bad habit, if you're trying to change your life around, you're trying to leave something that's haram, and that thing is inside of your home, right? You're trying to stop listening to music, but you have those CDs, right? You're trying to stay away from pornography or whatever the case is, but you're always around the computer alone, right? If you want to stay away from something like this, you got to try to be out the house. You got to try to put yourself in a situation where it's going to be hard to do that sin, right? So you want to stay away from the sins as much as possible. So that's the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ saying, stay away from it, as opposed to saying don't do it, all right? But when it comes to the acts of worship, the Prophet ﷺ, he commands us to do it as much as we can, right? To do it as much as we can. Now, when it comes to the prohibitions, right? When it comes to the prohibitions, when something is haram, does it mean that we have to stay away from it totally, absolutely, and there's no exceptions? Like, can somebody give me an exception where it will be okay to do something haram? Anyone? Yeah. Yeah, let's wait for the mic, yeah.
Assalamu
alaikum.
Let's say you're starving to death and the only available food is pork or pig, or the flesh of swine, then it would be halal to eat the food in order to stay alive.
Excellent, right? So the thing is, if you're stranded on an island, you're locked in a box or whatever the case is, you can't get out, and the only thing there is a bunch of bottles of like Budweiser, and like a case full of, you know, khinzir, pig, right? Pork, right? You got a bunch of pork sandwiches and you got a bunch of beer bottles, huh? Bacon, you're right? You got a bunch of bacon. You know, you're locked in a place. Imagine this, right? Imagine somebody locks you in a room, right? And they only put alcohol and bacon in there, right? So are you gonna be like, oh my God, this is haram, I can't do it, and then die, right? And then, you know, allow yourself to starve to death and die? No, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about a bunch of things that He has made haram, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. If somebody is forced to eat something haram, Allah mentions in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah mentions in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-An'am as well, right? In many different places, Allah speaks about this concept of if there's something haram to eat and you're forced to eat that thing, فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. Allah says that there's no sin upon the person if he does so. So does that mean that if I'm locked in this room, I can now binge eat this pork, right? Or start drinking that, you know, Heineken or whatever the case is, right? It's like, man, I've been waiting for this moment my whole life, right? No, it doesn't mean that. You can only take the amount that you need. You can only take the amount that you need. So for example, if you're locked in this room with all this pork and bacon and alcohol, you can't be like, well, this is all I have to eat. No, you have to eat only the amount that's going to protect you from the harm that you're trying to stay away from. Okay? So like if it's hunger, you know, you're trying to not die, but you shouldn't, you know, fill yourself like that. You just eat as much as you need to stay alive, right? Because that's not what you want to do, right? You know, you don't want to eat more than you're supposed to eat, than you have a need for, okay? And this, you know, this is based, you know, the scholars use verses like this to, you know, to mention a principle that is ad-darurat tubihu al-mahdhurat, that necessity makes things that are normally haram permissible. For example, if you're in a place now and you're gonna die if you don't eat something, right? You're gonna die. Let's say let's say you come out of this room, right? And the first place you come by is a market, right? And you need to eat something right now or you're about to pass out. Can you just grab an apple from the market without paying for it? You don't have any money. Can you grab it? Would that be considered stealing? No. Right? Why? Because you have a dire necessity. So not just a need, not just because you want to do it, but it must be a dire necessity. Only then does things that are normally haram become halal at that particular time. Now, a very interesting thing is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ, whoever is forced, غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ, without transgressing and without desiring. Allah mentions two conditions to eat something and to consume something that's normally haram. Is that you shouldn't have any desire for it. It should be a legitimate need and it should be a valid necessity. Right? Not just any type of need, but a necessity. You shouldn't desire it. And number two, you shouldn't, wala adin, and you shouldn't go overboard. Right? You shouldn't go over the means. You shouldn't take more than what you need. Right? Don't use the excuse of that necessity to now binge eat or do whatever you want. Right? It doesn't work like that. Okay? And this principle can be applied in so many different ways. For example, let's say there's a woman, she falls into the water now. It's like a beach or someplace like this, and a woman, she's drowning. Can you go in, can you jump in the water and like try to get her out as a man, and there's nobody else around? She's gonna die if you don't, right? So it'll be permissible in that case to now pull her out, right? For example, if you're the only doctor around, that can cure a specific illness, right? And then there's a sister that comes to you now, and there's nobody else that can cure her. No female nurses, no female doctors, but you're the only male doctor. And that cure, requires you to look at some part of her body that you're not supposed to normally look at, right? Can you do so because of the necessity? Yes, but like I said, it must be a dire necessity. There should be no other way in which you can, fulfill that need or necessity that you have. Is everybody clear on this? Okay, very important. So when the Prophet ﷺ, when he says that whatever I have forbidden you from, stay away from it, right? That, that's the general rule. But when there's a necessity, that's a specific case in which it will be permissible to do that thing that's normally haram. Now, let's talk about, since we've spoken about something that's haram and we mentioned that there's a, specific case in which you can, you'll be excused from that haram. Let's talk about the rulings of the Sharia. We know things can be haram. So when it comes to things, period, when it comes to your salah, when it comes to the things that you eat, when it comes to food and drink and dress and all of these different things that we engage in, all of these things can be, can fall under 5 rulings in the Sharia. We already know something can be haram, right? And what does haram mean? You have to stay away from it totally. Do we have any choice in the haram things? Absolutely not. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, whatever I have forbidden you from, stay away from it. That's clear. You can't do those things. So things that are haram are things that the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from doing. What are the other things? What are the other 4 categories that things could fall under? Anyone else? Yeah. Makruh. What does makruh mean? Good. Makruh means dislike. In other words, something the Prophet ﷺ could forbid us from doing something, but it may not be haram. Can anybody give me an example of this? Where the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us in a hadith, don't do this, but then it doesn't mean that it's haram, but it's only disliked, and you can actually do it if you have a need to do so. Can anybody give me any examples of this? Anyone? Eating of iguana?
Iguana, yeah. Wanted Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
I mean, the thing is the Prophet ﷺ, you know, some of the Sahaba, they were eating iguana, and the Prophet ﷺ, he refused to eat it, and then they asked, I believe it was Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu, and he asked the Prophet ﷺ about it, and the Prophet ﷺ said that he did not like it. That's not from the food that his people eat. I mean, Allahu A'lam if that would be considered makruh. Allahu A'lam. I haven't seen any statements of the scholars of that. Yeah.
Close your eyes while you're praying.
Closing your eyes while you're praying. Okay, some scholars mentioned that is makruh. What else? Anyone else? I'm going to give you guys an example, right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, he says in a hadith recorded by Imam Abu Dawud and Nasa'i, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, لا يغتسل الرجل بفضل المرأة ولا المرأة بفضل الرجل وليغترفا جميعا. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says in one hadith that a man, for example, let's say you have a couple, right, a husband and a wife. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that when a woman takes a bath now, back in those days they didn't have showers. So whatever water you had, that was in the middle of the desert. Water was scarce, right? So what they would do, what some of the companions would do is that they would take, they would make a ghusl in like a tub, and when they're finished, somebody else would come in and use that water. Somebody might be thinking like, ew, why would you do that? Remember, like I said, they're in a desert. You don't have water. Water is not flowing like it is, in our lands, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he says that a man should not use the water that was left over by a woman, nor should a woman use the water that was left over by a man. Is everybody clear on this? So did the Prophet ﷺ forbid this particular action? He definitely did. And it's an authentic hadith. But then you have another hadith where Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, in hadith in Sahih Muslim, he says, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يغتسل بفضل ميمونة رضي الله عنها. Ibn Abbas said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to use the water that was left behind by one of his wives, Maymuna radiallahu anha. So does that mean that it's something haram, you can't do it absolutely? No, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it. Right? So one of the things in which you can know if something is disliked and not really haram is when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, don't do a particular thing, but then he does it. Or then he says that it's permissible. That shows that the original prohibition is not because it's haram, it's just better not to do it. Is everybody with me here? I'm going to give you another example. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, yes?
Other than the wife.
What happened?
Use the water left over by his wife. Okay? But if it is water left over by another lady, then you use it.
Another lady? Oh, by another wife. Allahu A'lam, I've never seen the scholars discuss that particular issue. But the thing is, the general rule, I mean, like this is an issue of difference of opinion. But when you look at these two hadiths, any water that's used by anybody, I haven't seen any scholar mention like this particular issue of differentiation between if she's your wife or she's not your wife or your sister or something like that. But the general rule is that any water that anybody uses, it doesn't matter who uses that water. It could be your mom, your grandma, your grandma's grandma, your dad, your brother, your sister, your child, your friend. It could be some sister or somebody. If anybody uses any water, that water doesn't become impure. You could use that water. You know what I'm saying? You could use that water. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would be making wudu, and the water would fall off of his body, and the Sahaba would run to grab that water. So the thing is, when water is used by somebody, it doesn't make it najis or impure. Okay, and like I said, that's a view of some of the scholars, but that's not a view that we agree with. So we said things can be haram or things can be makruh. Haram means you can't do it. Makruh means it's best not to do it. What else? 3 more. Yeah.
Shubahat.
Shubuhat? No, where's Sahib Shubuhat? He's not here. No, not Shubuhat. Shubuhat is different, right? Those are doubtful things. We've spoken about that. So we got haram, we got makruh. What else? Yeah. Mubah. Mubah. What does mubah mean? Something that is just permissible. It's not disliked to do. For example, you have eating. Eating is mubah. You can eat, right? Mubah, another word for mubah is halal. Things that are halal, right? The crown chicken, spot on hillside, halal. MashaAllah, that's mubah, right? French fries, mubah. Fried rice, mubah. Wearing black, mubah. Wearing kufi, mashallah, mubah. You have wearing, a sock, mubah. Driving a car, mubah. These are permissible things, right? Going camping, mubah. Right? Going to the store, mubah. Waking up at 3 o'clock p.m., mubah. As long as you don't miss your salah, right? So you have so many different things that are mubah. Using a pencil, mubah. Using a pen, mubah. Whatever you have that's permissible, that's mubah. It's not recommended, nor is it disliked. Okay, what else we got? We got 3. We got haram, makruh, mubah. What else? Mustahab. You have things that are recommended. MashaAllah, we're going in order, MashaAllah. You have mustahab, things that are recommended. Not just permissible now, but it's even better if you do it, right? For example, praying your sunnah prayers, right? For example, so many different things that are, recommended to do. Putting on perfume, right, for the brothers, right, when you come out the house. For the sisters at home, right? This is something recommended. Okay, walking to the masjid, that's something recommended. You have reciting Quran, that's recommended. Is it wajib? Do you have to do it? No. And that brings us to our last one, and that's wajib, something you must do. All right, something you must do. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, whatever I have forbidden you from, then stay away from it. That has 2 categories. It could be haram or it could be makruh, disliked. Right? You should just stay away from it, period. Right? For example, there's another hadith when the Prophet ﷺ, he says, none of you should drink while he's standing. But it's been narrated that the Prophet ﷺ, he drank while he stood up. And Ali radiallahu anhu, after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, Ali radiallahu anhu, he was, I think he was eating or drinking standing up, and somebody said, Ali, how could you do this? Radiallahu anhu. So Ali, he said that we would drink and walk. We would, eat and drink, and we would walk. Forget about standing up. We would walk during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he wouldn't stop us. So what does that show us? That that prohibition of eating and drinking, or drinking standing up, it's only best not, it's best not to do it. But if somebody has a need to do it, right? It's best not to do it. It's something makruh. But like I said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, whatever I have forbidden you from, then stay away from it, whether it's makruh or haram. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, whatever I have commanded you with, then do it as much as you can. Whether it's wajib, you must do it. It's obligatory, like your 5 daily prayers, or if it's recommended to do, right? You should do it as much as you can. So the thing is, some people, they have this problem. Like there's certain places in the world, if you come from back home in different countries, there's this notion that you must pray your sunnah prayers, right? You must pray your sunnah prayers. Like if somebody prays Salatul Dhuhr and they don't pray 4 before and 2 after, it's like, oh my God, this is a bad person, right? And, a lot of people, when they learn that this is only recommended and it's not wajib, then they stop doing it. That's a problem, right? Because the thing is that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, whatever I have commanded you to do, then do as much as you can. As much as you can, right? But the thing is when there's something recommended and somebody doesn't do it, you cannot make inkar of that person. You can't say, oh, you're not a good Muslim, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. No, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but you should encourage them to do it, right? You should encourage them to do it. So the thing is that, the Sahaba, you would never find that they had this thing when they were asked, is it wajib or mustahab? Is it obligatory or recommended? No, they would do it, period. Whether it's recommended or whether it's obligatory, right? They would just do it right away. Even the way that the Prophet ﷺ would walk, they would walk, right? That's something permissible to do, right? But they would try to imitate him in even his natural qualities, the way that he wore his shirt, the way that he would walk, the way that he would speak. They would try to imitate everything. Right, everything that he would do, they would try to do it the exact same way. So that's how we should be, Anytime something comes to you, you hear about something that's a virtuous deed, don't think that, oh, this is recommended, I don't need to do it, so I'm not going to do it. No, you should try to encourage yourself to do it as much as you can, okay? So the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, what I've forbidden you from doing, then stay away from it, right? What I've forbidden you from, stay away from it, and what I've commanded you with, then do it as much as you can. This statement right here, what does it show you about the amount of commandments and the amount of prohibitions? Is there anything in this statement that can tell us if one is more than the other? If more haram things, there are more haram things than things that we're commanded with? Anyone? Yeah. No? The scholars, they mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that whatever I have commanded you with, do it as much as you can. And whatever I have prohibited you from, stay away from it. In other words, the Prophet ﷺ, like one of the wisdoms that the scholars mentioned behind him wording it like this, is because the things that are haram are very clear. They're very limited, right? You can count the haram things on your fingers, right? On a particular topic, right? The things that are haram are not many, right? The majority of things in this dunya are halal and permissible. There's only a few foods that are haram. Okay? So the amount of things that are haram compared to the amount of things that we're commanded to do is a lot less. So because of that, the Prophet ﷺ is not expecting us to do everything that he has commanded us to do. Why? Because he said do as much as you can. Because, for a lot of people, sometimes doing everything he has commanded us to do, right? It's so much out there. There's so many good things to do. There's so many acts of worship to do. But when it comes to the haram things, it's very clear, right? They're very limited and they're very few compared to the things that we're commanded to do. Now, inshallah ta'ala, let's talk about a few points related to this part because it's very important. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, do it as much as you can. Whatever he's commanded you to do it as much as you can. Now there's a principle that the scholars, they mention, and that is that when there's difficulty, whenever you find that there's difficulty in the Sharia, you find that Allah Azza wa Jal makes it easy for that person. Right? Allah makes it easy for that person. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he says, do as much as you can, because sometimes there's difficulty. Sometimes you can't do the full act of worship, but sometimes Allah allows you to do half of it, or Allah allows you to do some of it. Or sometimes Allah, He allows you to delay the act of worship. Right? Let's talk about a couple examples, inshallah. The first example that I'm going to mention is when it comes to salah. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, whatever I have commanded you to do as much as you can. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us, صَلِّ قَائِمًا. He says to us that pray standing. In other words, should you be praying sitting down? No. Right? You should be praying standing up. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَقَاعِدًا. If you can pray standing up, then pray sitting down. فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَى جَنْبٍ. And if you're not able to sit down, then what should you do? On your side. Right? Lie down on your side and try to pray in that way. So in other words, the default rule in your salah is that you should be standing up. You should be standing up. That's the asl in your salah. That you should be standing up. If you can't stand up, then you sit down. If you can't even sit down, sometimes you're, at the hospital or whatever the case is, you can't sit down. You have to lie down. If you get up, you have a cut or an injury or something like this, you can't get up, you pray lying down. So if you look at this, right, the Prophet ﷺ, he's saying, whatever I have commanded you with, do it as much as you can. So this is a practical example of this hadith that we're dealing with right now. Now, something that I want to mention though is that a lot of people, when it comes to sitting down on the salah, a lot of people think that when you're just traveling, you can sit down. And that's a mistake. Okay, when it comes to the 5 daily prayers, the Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, what you find is a lot of people, they go on a road trip, brothers go on a road trip, mashallah, and they're praying Dhuhr in the car standing up. They're praying Dhuhr in the car sitting down when they have the ability to come out the car. Right? They have the ability to, to pull over and to stand up and to pray. But they think that, as long as I'm traveling, I can sit down. Right? And we're going to talk about this in a second. But I just want to, get that in your minds that, if it's an obligatory salah, you must stand up if you have the ability to do so. You can't sit down. Okay? You cannot sit down. So let's talk about another example, and we'll come back to this point later. But I just want to mention a few more examples, inshallah. When you're sick or when you're traveling while you're fasting, right? For example, if somebody is traveling, fasting might become difficult, right? You have to break your fast, right? You're going to be out, you're going to be, walking, running, you're going to be on a horse or in a car, you got to catch a train, you're going to be traveling. Allah allows you to break your fast in Ramadan while you're traveling or if you're sick, right? If you're sick, what happens, right? You can't fast. Sometimes the doctor tells you need to take this medication at 1 p.m. You have to, right? Because you're, if you don't take this medication, some problem is going to happen in your body. Can you break your fast? Absolutely. Right? So the Prophet, he says, do whatever I've commanded you as much as you can. So the person who is sick, he can't fast. There's going to be some harm, that's going to be caused in his body. So what does Allah allow him to do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows him to delay that fast and to make it up after Ramadan. Allah, he says, فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخْرَ. Make it up at other days. Also, the menstruating woman, another example where she has to obey Allah and His Messenger as much as she can, is when a woman is, during her monthly period, right? There's a week out of the month where the woman, she can't pray and she can't fast. Okay, but what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, allow her to do? She can make up the fast, but she doesn't have to make up the salah. Aisha radiallahu anha, she said about the menstruating women, فَنُؤْمَرْ بِقَضَاءِ الصِّيَامِ وَلَا نُؤْمَرْ بِقَضَاءِ الصَّلَاةِ. Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that we are commanded as women to make up the fasts, but we're not commanded to make up the salah. Okay? So look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for those who are not capable of doing the obligations, so they can do as much as they can. So the thing is that, one may ask that, why does a menstruating woman, why can't she pray? Right? Why can't she pray? And one reason is because obviously she's having this, impure substance that's constantly coming out of her body. That's, one reason. Another reason is because the thing is sometimes other people, especially men, we don't understand how hard it is for women to go through that. Right? Like if you're a guy, you've never experienced that, right? You've never experienced having those cramps and those problems, those mood swings and those emotional problems that you get while you're on the monthly period. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how difficult it is. Allah knows how hard it is. So because of that, He has waived salah for a whole week. While she's on a period, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has waived salah. Like, just think about that mercy. How easy Allah has made it for the women who have to go through this difficulty. In other words, if nobody else shows you any sympathy, if nobody else shows you any care about the difficulty that you're going in, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it easy for you, and that should be enough for you, right? Just look at the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. So, you have many different circumstances, many different situations where if you're not able to do something, you're going to always find in the Sharia that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't hold you accountable for what you're not able to do. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't hold a soul, accountable for more than it can bear. If you can't bear something, Allah Azza wa Jal will not hold you accountable for that. Is everybody with me here? Another example of this is, for example, raising children. Right? We all have an obligation to raise our children properly. But does that mean that you're going to be held accountable for everything your kids do? Absolutely not. They're going to grow up and they're going to be individuals themselves. Look at Nuh alayhi salam. Nuh alayhi salam, his son disbelieved in him. Right? Nuh alayhi salam, his son disbelieved in him, and he refused to come on the ark with Nuh alayhi salam. And if you read Surah Hud, Allah Azza wa Jal, He tells us that Nuh alayhi salam called upon his son. Right? He said, Ya bunayya arkam ma'ana. He said, oh my son, come ride the ship with us. وَلَا تَكُمْ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And don't be from those who are disbelievers. Right? So the thing is Nuh alayhi salam, he's not held accountable for the decisions of his son, because that's outside of his control. So whatever is outside of your control, you're not going to be held accountable for that. But whatever is under your control, you're going to be asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about that. So let's just talk about this issue really quick about the praying. Let's just mention a hadith. There's a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim عن عامر ibn Rabi'a radiallahu anhu. This companion, Amir radiallahu anhu, he says, رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي على راحلته حيث اتجهت به. Amir radiallahu anhu, he said that I saw the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam pray on his camel. I saw the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam pray on his camel. Remember, he's sitting down on his camel. And the Prophet ﷺ would pray on the camel and pray wherever the camel would face. You can't control where the camel is going to face sometimes. Sometimes he goes a bit left, sometimes he goes a bit right. But the Prophet ﷺ would sit down on the camel and he would pray on the camel. Okay? And Al-Bukhari mentions, in addition, he mentions that Amr said that the Prophet ﷺ would yumi. He would make an indication with his head. In other words, when the Prophet would be praying, he would indicate the ruku' and the sujood with his head. Right? He wouldn't actually make the actual sujood, but he would beckon the sujood and the ruku' with his head. And in addition, in Imam Tirmidhi's collection, there's another hadith where Amr radiallahu anhu, he says, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ يَصْنَعُهُ فِي الْمَكْتُوبَةِ. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would never ever do this in the obligatory salah. So from this hadith, what does that tell us? That the salah that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was praying on top of the camel, was that Fajr? Was that Dhuhr? Was that Asr, Maghrib or Isha? No. It was an optional prayer. In some narration, it was Salatul Witr. Right? Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he mentions that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would pray Salatul Witr on the camel. So if it's a salah that's not obligatory, then you could sit down. But if it's a salah that you have to, that you must pray, like Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib or Isha, the 5 prayers, you must stand up for those. So while you're traveling, even if you're traveling, you must stand up if you have the ability to stand up in that salah. You can't just sit down because you're just traveling like that. If you have the ability to come out the car and to pray, right, then you must stand up. You cannot sit down. That's a very common misconception, yes.
What about on the airplane? On the plane?
On the plane. Yeah, like for example, the plane is the same thing. For example, if the flight attendants, they tell you that, hey man, if you're going to get up, you might die. You might fall and break your neck or some big harm is going to happen. right? There's some air turbulence, right? And everybody must be buckled and sit down. And the time for salah is going to go out, right? You know, Salatul Isha is going to be at 9:50 something. Oh man, what am I going to do? Then you sit down and you pray. Because you have no way of praying standing up, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, pray standing up. If you're not able, then sit down. If you're not able to sit down, then you lay down on your side. So, not being able to, that could be because of your circumstances, or that could be because of your actual condition. Sometimes you have knee problems, right? If you stand up, there's going to be some big problems, with your knees. You're not going to be able to walk, right? If you, make a ruku' and make a sujood like this, right? So very important. And, the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us about the optional prayers. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Salatul rajuli qa'idan nisfu salah. That whoever prays, the optional prayer, of course, you want to pray your sunnah prayers, you want to pray tahajjud. Some narrations mention the Prophet ﷺ would pray Salatul Tahajjud, right? Qiyamul Layl, he would pray sitting down sometimes, right? He would pray sitting down sometimes. Whether he's traveling or not, at home, if you want to pray your sunnah prayers, you want to pray sitting down, it's perfectly fine. But the obligatory prayers, the 5 daily prayers, you must pray those standing up unless you have a valid excuse, right? Unless you're not able to do so. And the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us that praying sitting down is half the reward, right? If you pray in a recommended prayer sitting down, it's half of the reward. Right, so the normal reward that you're going to get for praying Qiyamul Layl, right? You want to pray Taraweeh, you want to pray sitting down? La ba's, no problem. Right, but you're only going to get half of the reward that you would normally get if you stand up. Okay? So the Prophet ﷺ, in this first part of the hadith, he said, whatever I have forbidden you from, then stay away from it. And whatever I have commanded you to do, then do it as much as you can. The Prophet ﷺ did not say whatever Allah has commanded you to do. He didn't say what Allah has prohibited you from. He said what I have prohibited you from. Somebody may say that I'm only supposed to follow Allah. I'm only supposed to obey Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, مَن يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهِ. Whoever obeys the messenger has obeyed Allah. So really, whenever the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives us a command or prohibition, it's from Allah. Allah Azza wa Jalla, he says, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. This prophet that comes to you, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he doesn't speak from his own desire. Right? When the Prophet ﷺ tells us to do something or tells us not to do something, it's not because of his own desire. إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى. It is only revelation that is given to him. And the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us that أُوتِيتُ الْقُرْآنَ وَمِثْلَهُ. I've been given the Quran and what is like the Quran. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So the sunnah holds just as much weight as the Quran does. You must follow both. Allah, he says, وَأَطِيعُ اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُ الرَّسُولَ. Obey Allah and obey the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if there's any Muslim, he thinks, well, that's a hadith, I don't really have to follow that, then that's wrong. If it's authentic and established from his sunnah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you must follow it if it's something wajib. And you must stay away from it if it's something haram. Then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentions, and this is the last point that he mentions the reason why the previous nations, they were destroyed. فإنما أهلك الذين كان قبلكم فإنما أهلك من كان قبلكم كثرة مسائلهم واختلافهم على أنبيائهم. The Prophet ﷺ said that indeed the thing that destroyed those people who came before you, right, were the last of nations, right, were the last ummah. The Prophet ﷺ is the last prophet. You had so many prophets that came before him, and we spoke about the number of prophets, right, and the number of the nations. You had so many nations before us. Right? The Prophet ﷺ tells that those nations that were destroyed before us, the thing that destroyed them were two things. Right? Their excessive questioning, كَثْرَةُ مَسَائِلِهِمْ, because they asked too many questions. They asked so many questions, وَاخْتِلَافُهُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنْبِيَائِهِمْ, and because they differed with their prophets. They went against their prophets. So think about that. The people that were destroyed before us, they were destroyed because of these two things. So brothers and sisters, think about that. If you read the Quran and you read the story of Ad, of Thamud, you're going to see why Allah Azza wa Jalla, destroyed these people. It's because they went against their prophets. Right? Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions that Bani Israel, that the Yahud before, right, the nation before us, the Jews, that they killed their prophets. Right? And I was watching a video on YouTube. It was of this rabbi. Right? It was interesting, right? I clicked on it. The question was, did Bani Israel, did the Jews kill their prophets? Right? And he said yes. That our people, we kill the prophets. And Allah Azza wa Jalla addresses Bani Israel in the Quran. The Jews, Allah addresses them in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them, وَتَقْتُلُونَ الْأَنْبِيَاءَ بِغَيْرِ حَقٍّ. And you kill the prophets without any right. This is something that they used to do before. They used to go against their prophets, kill their prophets even. Like how could somebody that has any bit of iman kill the messenger that's sent to them? Think about that, right? What level of iman do you have to go low, or kufr? Right? How low do you have to go to do something like that? So this is what these previous nations did. They differ with their prophets. So let's talk about the first thing, about, excessive questioning. right? Doesn't mean that you can't ask any questions. No, you can ask questions, but this, the scholars mentioned that there are certain types of questions you shouldn't be asking. For example, useless questions, questions that have no benefit, right? You shouldn't ask any questions that have no benefit, right? In other words, when you're trying to ask a question, you should have a legitimate need, right? You should actually try to gain some knowledge in your question. It shouldn't be for fun. You're trying to ask questions and you're trying to make fun of things, right? So that's the first thing, is that you shouldn't ask any questions that have no benefit. Right? You should ask questions that do have benefit, that are constructive, right? Sometimes we ask about things, especially when it comes to the akhirah, right? Some people, they ask, how does Allah do this? How did Allah rise above the throne? We don't know this stuff. Well, what kind of question is that, right? Imam Malik, in his gathering, somebody asked, right? Somebody asked Imam Malik that, how did Allah rise above the throne, right? And Imam Malik said that these type of questions are only asked by innovators, and I don't see you except as an innovator. Right? Asking questions like this is something that's dangerous, right? You don't want to think about Allah in that way, or ask about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that He didn't reveal, right? So not all questions, some people, they say, it's only a question. Not all questions are right. For another example of this, right, is, for example, let's say there's a lecture and somebody asks a question, they ask a sheikh a question that they know that if the sheikh answers, there's going to cause some fitna, right? For example, let's say a sheikh, he goes to like a community and they have some deviant beliefs and he's trying to give them da'wah. If somebody tries to bring something up to the sheikh for him to mention something that's going to cause some fitna in the community, right? These type of questions, sometimes it can even be haram to ask some of these questions if it's going to lead to something haram, okay? So not all questions, they're okay to ask, right? So the first thing that I mentioned is useless questions, they should be avoided. Also theoretical questions. Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu, one of the companions, people would come to him and ask him theoretical things. That what about this and what about that? They would say, oh Zayd ibn Thabit, you're a companion, right? What about this, right? What is the ruling on this if it happens? So Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu, he would say that when it happens, then come and ask me. Right? Don't ask me about things that haven't happened yet, right? Don't ask me about these what if questions, right? If it happens, then we deal with it, right? But you should only be asking about things that have benefit. So that's the first thing, that's asking questions, right? In other words, you should have a sincere desire for knowledge. Number two, differing with the prophets, okay? We have to ask ourselves a question, right? And that is, that why were the prophets sent to us in the first place? The prophets were sent to us for us to follow them, right? The prophets were sent for us to follow them and for us to obey them. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah An-Nisa, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا لِيُطَاعَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Allah, He says that we have not sent any messenger except that he should be, that he should be followed and obeyed by the permission of Allah. That's why Allah sends prophets and messengers, for us to obey them. Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't come down here Himself and He doesn't come and teach us Himself. No, He sends prophets and messengers. This is the sunnah of Allah. This is how Allah does things, from Adam alayhi salam all the way to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi salam. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala waste sending the prophets so that you can say, I don't need to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I don't need to follow him. No, if you're a Muslim, how can you say that? And we already spoken about, the second hadith explaining the shahada. If you believe that you don't have to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you have a problem when you say Muhammadur Rasulullah. Right? When the mu'adhin is saying, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, and you're repeating, you're saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, and you don't want to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have a problem in your sincerity of that statement. Right? So think about that, right? There's two parts of the shahada. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Right? So He's been sent to us to follow sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And even Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he saw some people and they were, differing with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Some people, they were saying, the Prophet said that, but Abu Bakr said this, Umar said this. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he says, يُوشِكُ أَن تَنْزِلَ عَلَيْكُمْ حِجَارَةٌ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ. He says that stones are about to fall upon you from the sky, meaning Allah is about to destroy you, right? Meaning that Allah Azza wa Jalla destroyed people before for differing with their prophets, right? He's saying stones are about to fall upon you from the sky. I say that the Prophet ﷺ said this, and you say that Abu Bakr and Umar said that, right? So even when it comes to these top-notch companions, right? When a statement comes to us from the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, we're not to put anybody's opinion in front of his statement ﷺ, right? Nobody. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tuqaddimu bayna yaday Allahi wa rasulih. O you who believe, do not put anything. Allah doesn't even mention what we're not supposed to put. But He said, do not put before Allah and His Messenger anything. Right? He left it open. Okay, don't put anything before Allah Azza wa Jalla and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is amongst the traits of the munafiqun. And we're going to mention this last point, and then we're going to take whatever questions you have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the traits of the munafiqun is that they don't obey the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah An-Nur, Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, وَيَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالرَّسُولِ. Allah says that the munafiqun, the hypocrites, those people who are not true believers, they say, we believe in Allah and we believe in the Messenger. Okay? وَيَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالرَّسُولِهِ. So Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, وَيَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالرَّسُولِ وَأَطَعْنَا ثُمَّ يَتَوَلَّى فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ وَمَا أُولَٰئِكَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And they say, we obey Allah, we believe in Allah, and we obey, we believe in the Messenger, and we have obeyed. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that, that they run away and they turn away from the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He tells us, وَيَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالرَّسُولِ وَأَطَعْنَا ثُمَّ يَتَوَلَّى فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ وَمَا أُولَٰئِكَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَإِذَا دُعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَهُمْ. And when they're commanded, when they're called to Allah and to His Messenger, لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَهُم, to judge between them, when somebody, who has some, this type of hypocrisy in his heart. When people say, hey man, the Prophet ﷺ said this and he said that. When these people, when they're called to the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ to judge between them, to give them the decree of whatever they're asking about, right, to solve their, their issue, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَإِذَا دُعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَهُمْ إِذَا فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. You're going to find that all of a sudden they're turning away from it. Right? They're turning away from the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Then Allah, He says, وَإِن يَكُنْ لَهُمُ الْحَقُّ يَأْتُوا إِلَيْهِ مُذْعِنِينَ. But if in the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam there's anything in their favor, then they're going to submit to it. If they agree with it, then they're going to follow it. But if they don't agree with the sunnah, they're not going to follow it. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, أَفِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ. Do they have any sickness in their heart? أَمِ ارْتَابُوا. Or do they have any doubt in their hearts? أَمْ يَخَافُونَ أَن يَحِيفَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ وَرَسُولُهُ. Or do they fear that Allah and His Messenger will be unjust to them? بَلْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Those are the ones that are the oppressors, the wrongdoers. So think about that, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls these people that don't want to follow the sunnah. They don't want to follow the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and they want to turn away from His way. Allah tells us that they are the ones who are oppressing themselves. Okay? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِنَّمَا كَانَ قَوْلَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That what is the statement of the true believers now? The statement of the true believers, the only statement that they make, أَن يَقُولُوا سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا, is that they say, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. We have heard and we have already obeyed. Right? And Allah Azza wa Jalla, He mentions, وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And they are those who are successful. So brothers and sisters, when you find something in Islam that's concrete, no difference of opinion about this issue, or you find that this is the strongest opinion, and you see the hadith that's very clear, and then you want to follow your opinion or somebody else's opinion, very scary situation. Right? You don't want to put yourself in that situation, because that's one of the traits of the hypocrites, those who are munafiqun. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from being like them. Ameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we're always submitting to Him first and foremost before anybody and anything. We're always submitting to Allah first and foremost, and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions? Yes.
Which is at home. So what category would you put that in? It doesn't mean that they shouldn't come to the masjid, but it's better for them to pray in their inner chamber, which is at their home.
Okay. Okay, طيب. Okay, excellent, right? So the thing is, the whole issue of women praying in the masjid is, are women allowed to pray in the masjid? Can they only pray at home? The thing is, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا تمنعوا إماء الله مساجد الله. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, do not forbid the female slaves of Allah from the houses of Allah. So us as husbands or fathers or brothers, whatever the case is if your wife or your sister or your mom, they want to go to the masjid, don't stop them. Right? Don't stop them from going to the masjid. But there's a woman during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, she said, "Oh Messenger of Allah, I want to pray with you. I want to come in the masjid. I want to pray in the masjid." The Prophet ﷺ, he said about this woman, "Baytuha afdalu laha." Her house is better. So the scholars, they have some different opinions about this, but the correct opinion, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, is that it's permissible, it's mubah to pray in the masjid. Okay, it's permissible to pray in the masjid, but in her house is better for her. It's mustahab to pray in the house. It's not obligatory to pray in the house. She can pray in the masjid if she wants to, but it's even more rewarding for her to pray inside of her home. Is everybody clear on this? So it's not like, a woman, she's passing by the masjid. She wants to pray in the masjid. She wants to come to the masjid occasionally. She can do so. You can't stop her from doing that, right? You shouldn't stop her from doing that. You should encourage your wife to come to the masjid. She might hear something from a lecture or something like this, right? She might benefit in some way. The atmosphere of the masjid perhaps is not like the atmosphere at home, okay? So the thing is it's permissible, but it's better to pray at home. Is everybody clear on this? Any other questions? Any other questions? No? طيب. At all? طيب, so we'll stop here inshallah ta'ala. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.